My name is Camille Porter. I'm 34 and I work at the Houston Museum of Art, specializing in restoring antique paintings. My job is bringing neglected artworks back to life, stripping away the damage time leaves behind, and sometimes even undoing the scars people inflict. But I never imagined I'd one day have to restore my own identity. I never thought the first painting hung in our new house would feel like a punch to the gut. Not in a metaphorical sense, literally. It was a family portrait, 5 of us. My dad, my mom, a young boy smiling broadly, a little girl lingering in the shadows, and a glaring blank space where the artist's signature belonged. It wasn't there. And just like that, my name wasn't included in anything that belonged to that house. You're overreacting, Camille. No one needs this house more than you do, my mom said, lifting the deed transfer papers like a trophy. He has a wife and on the way. What do you have? Just yourself. Those words weren't a stab. They were a sledgehammer to the spine. I froze in the living room, the same room where I had placed every piece of furniture, hung every painting, chosen every tile. Now I didn't recognize anything in there. They were having a housewarming, and I felt more like an uninvited guest than anyone else. You're hearing this story on Renvenge Zinnia, where hidden truths are told in the storyteller's own voice. If you've ever bent over backwards for someone only to be called selfish, if you've spent your life being kind just to receive a deed with "Know Your Name" on it, then you'll understand why I couldn't stay silent this time. And if stories like this help you feel less alone, feel free to hit subscribe, because some truths deserve to be heard at the right time and in the right voice. For 11 years, I lived quietly, penny pinching every step of the way. I had no spouse or kids. I never took extravagant vacations, but I had a simple dream, a cozy house where I could hang paintings, make tea, and work in peace, surrounded by muted colors and quiet mornings that felt like home. In January, my parents called me in a panic. The bank was threatening to foreclose on their old house. Without hesitation, I emptied my savings account and transferred exactly $190,000, all I'd managed to save over more than a decade. "Will it be in our names together?" I remember asking, excited yet unsure. Mom replied, "Oh, sweetie, that's unnecessary. We'll put it in your name. You're the one who paid for it, and Noah will really appreciate it." Noah, my half-brother, always the golden child. From the moment I took my first art class, my mother said, "That won't put food on the table." But she didn't hesitate to spend $30,000 sending Noah to bartending school in New York. He quit after 6 months, then on to an organic coffee startup, then NFTs. Every failure bailed out by Mom, always taking from her retirement to do it. I wasn't jealous. At least I convinced myself I wasn't, until that moment, standing in the room full of people, hearing my mother announce the house would be in Noah's name, not mine. I could feel my breath catch, stutter. It was like someone had repainted my life in black over and over, forgetting the original colors. I glanced around. Joanna, my college best friend, had turned pale, her hand shaking around her wine glass. Aunt Helen, my mom's sister, stood quietly, anger etched across her face. And everyone else? Their smiles were tight, their eyes avoiding mine. "I paid for it," I said softly, as if reminding myself, "This isn't right." Mom sighed condescendingly, like I was a spoiled kid. "You work at a museum, Camille. You'll recover from this. You don't need a house. You just have paintings and tea." Something inside me cracked. Not my heart, it had grown numb, but my patience. The fragile belief that if I was good enough, hardworking enough, kind enough, one day I'd be seen. I turned to leave, but then I saw that portrait, the one above the dining table. There I was, standing off-center, not smiling, and in the corner where I'd once painted my signature in black oil, someone had deliberately scrubbed it out. That empty space, it didn't just make me want to cry, it told me I'd been right all along, because when someone erases your name from what you helped build, they've already erased you from their hearts. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the loser. I felt like the spark that was just about to ignite. Noah had a nickname my mother always used, her voice as sweet as honey and tea, Mom's golden boy. As for me, I was always called that quiet girl who just sketches and hides in the corners like a ghost. I remember being 12, taking an aptitude test at school. My art teacher called my mom afterwards saying I had rare talent and should attend a specialized art program. Mom just laughed and replied, "She's only good at making pretty pictures. I'm not raising an artist." 2 weeks later, Noah received a brand new Sony camcorder because he was interested in filmmaking. Funny thing was, the only footage he filmed was him goofing around in the kitchen for YouTube, and he dropped it 3 months later for lack of inspiration. I didn't resent him. Really, I didn't. I just remembered. I remembered eating lunch alone after school while Noah was off on a camping trip with his buddies. I remembered opening the fridge to find my lunch in an old plastic container, while Noah's was wrapped in foil with a cute sticky note on top. In 11th grade, I once borrowed a high-end watercolor set my stepdad had brought back from Italy, still sealed in the glass cabinet, reserved for Noah when he said he might study graphic design. I borrowed it for just a few hours. I placed each paint tablet into the palette, mixed a few colors, and painted a simple still life, a teacup on a windowsill in the afternoon light. That first painting made me cry. It was also the first painting my mother tore to shreds in front of me. "You don't touch things that aren't yours," she said coldly. Then she called me what? That shadow with sneaky hands. I went silent. 3 days later, Noah snapped a photo of the watercolor set and posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Thanks, Mom, for always believing I can do anything." He never even opened the set. I moved out when I was 19. I studied painting restoration at a community center because I couldn't afford an art school. I worked as a dental receptionist during the day and restored old books for a small antique shop in the evenings. I had just 2 days off each month, and I usually spent those 2 days painting for free. I never borrowed a penny from my parents. In fact, I'd sent them money at least 5 times whenever Mom called, crying. My pension got used to fund Noah's certification classes. I never minded. I thought it was just what family did. I remember during the 2020 lockdown, I got my pay cut for 3 months, and I still sent them $400 each month. Meanwhile, Noah started a dropshipping store selling inspirational quote caps. I bought one for $36 just to support him, never wore it. The quote read, "Family first. Always." Last year, when my parents called asking for help, I didn't ask why they couldn't pay their mortgage. I only asked one question. Has the bank already sent a foreclosure notice? When they said they sent a second warning, I transferred the money within 24 hours. $190,000. That was everything I'd saved in 11 years. Money from restorations, from selling my own paintings, money I didn't spend on vacations, a new car, or even an upgraded computer, even though my Photoshop machine was practically crying for a replacement. I didn't have any grand plans for the money. I just had a quiet dream. A house with sliding glass doors, tall bookshelves, and a little garden in the back where I could grow rosemary, lavender, and violet. I even drew the floor plan and taped it above my bed. I called it my space for someone who doesn't get to be chosen. I folded that dream and handed it to my parents, with the hope that this time I wouldn't be the invisible one. We went house hunting together, and the final pick, a 2-story house on Willow Street, was my choice. I negotiated the price with the realtor. I revised the purchase contract 3 times because my mom changed her mind about the payment schedule. I signed the deposit agreement. I chose every tile for the kitchen, the very one Noah later said, "We should tear that down and redo it." I'm not telling you this to complain. I'm telling you so I don't forget how far I've come, how much I paid, and how they cut me out of it all just because I had no one else to call my own family. But I didn't come alone. I had a contract. I had faded writing on the contract draft, and I had a notebook with Porter Camille written on the first page. Now they wanted to overwrite it with someone else's name. I no longer needed them to see me. I needed them to return to me the right to have a name. I used to think family love was like the primer beneath an oil painting. You can't always see it, but without it, the whole thing starts to crack from within. And I believed that, even as the fissures began to show. After transferring the money, I didn't demand anything grand, no strings attached, no binding contract. I simply said to my mom, "You can put your name on the deed too, but I hope this time I don't get erased." She nodded, hugged me, her hand cold as a fact sheet. "You're the most reasonable one in the family. I'm so thankful." I believed her, and I began to dream once again. We started house hunting during the late winter. There were pricey options, decaying ones, homes with leaky roofs. But one Friday afternoon, I stepped into the 2-story house on Willow Street. Sunlight poured in through a skylight, and the wooden staircase creaked gently under my feet. I knew it. This was it. The house I'd drawn in my college sketches, with a dedicated attic for painting and a wall of bookshelves. I turned to my mom. "This one, Mom. It's the one, right?" She looked at me, then glanced at Noah, who was absorbed in his phone and nodded absently. If Noah's okay with it, then so am I. I smiled, a tight tug at my heart. It's always Noah's approval that comes first. After that came the relentless back and forth, calls, meetings with the lawyer, papers to the realtor. I was listed as the financial sponsor, provided full bank statements for the transfer, signed the purchase agreement. Yet, everything stalled in ways that felt suspicious. Week 1, the lawyer was supposedly sick. Week 2, Noah was out of town, meeting with his fiancée in another state. Week 3, the draft agreement had disappeared and needed to be reissued by the notary. I felt uneasy, but I didn't accuse anyone, not because I'm naive, but because I wanted to believe this time they'd honor their word. One Saturday morning, I was at our favorite coffee shop with Joanna, my only friend who truly saw me, even when I pretended everything was fine. She'd helped protect my old sketches in a tube when I quietly withdrew from a student exhibition after Mom said, "No one cares about your paintings." She was the one who'd text me every month. "How's your savings account looking?" Her eyes didn't care about the numbers. She knew what I was giving up. That day, I confided everything. The house, the money, the missing legal paperwork. She set her coffee down and studied me. "Camille, I know you love them, but please, get everything in writing. At least ask for copies of what you've signed." I let out a soft laugh. Mom hates being questioned. She'll think I don't trust her. Joanna didn't smile. It's not that she can't be trusted. It's that they're using family to control your kindness. I just don't want to get a phone call from you crying. I didn't follow her advice. Instead, I bought small things for the house, meaningful touches. A set of lavender-printed kitchen towels, my favorite pale purple, a doormat with "This house has a heart," a porcelain tea set, white with gold rims, just like my grandmother's. I remember telling Mom, I want to set up the second floor as a little library. She replied, "If Noah's okay with it, that's Jessica's room. Noah's fiancé wants it for the baby." A baby. A life not yet born, but already granted space in the house. And me, the person who made that space possible, I was merely someone who could move in if needed. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't want to. Because if I admitted the truth, I'd have to face the question I'd avoided my whole life. Have I ever truly belonged in this family? I survived on hope. I believed that no matter how faded a painting looks, it can be restored. I wanted to believe family works the same way, but maybe I was wrong. There were drafts. They weren't missing a signature. Someone had deliberately scrubbed it out, then rewritten it with someone else's name underneath. I arrived at the party a little earlier than everyone else, not because I wanted attention, but because I thought this was my moment to place those small, meaningful items in the house I helped bring to life. I spread out a pale beige lace-trimmed tablecloth on the long dining table. set a bouquet of wildflowers I bought that morning in a green ceramic vase, the kind I found at a roadside antique store. With each item I touched, I imagined the future: cozy dinners, weekend tea, quiet Sunday mornings painting beneath the attic window. There was no name of mine painted anywhere on the walls, but I felt myself etched into every corner until the party officially began. Guests arrived with wine, flowers, pastries. Everyone was smiling, shaking hands, congratulating the happy couple. I stood in a corner of the kitchen, quietly filling a glass of water for myself, observing it all, as if I were the backstage coordinator. Then I heard my mother's voice carry across the living room. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Noah and Jessica. This house is the start of a whole new chapter for their little family, and we are so proud to have helped make their dream come true." I froze. Jessica, whom I'd only met twice, stood next to Noah, her hand on his arm. Her baby bump showed under her floral dress, and her eyes were radiant. And me? I was standing there with a glass of water, feeling like a maid who'd accidentally wandered into a luxurious party. I stepped closer to my mother, whispering, trying to stay calm. "Mom, did you just say, 'This house is theirs, not mine?'" She looked at me, hesitated for a moment, then picked up a folder from the mantelpiece, lifting it like it was a trophy. "We had to redo some paperwork, Camille. Since you don't have your own family yet, your stepdad and I decided to transfer the deed to Noah. He needs stability for his wife and baby." I couldn't hear the rest. Inside my head, nothing but echoes reverberated. No family of your own. Transfer. Stability for wife and baby. A few moments later, Noah stepped forward, raised his glass. "Special thanks to Mom, Dad, and, Camille, too. This will be the house that starts our family's journey. We're probably going to renovate the kitchen, knock down a wall or two. Jessica wants a bigger kitchen. And the attic? It'll be her office." The attic. The place I'd imagined spending Sunday afternoons with the window open and paints at hand. Now it would be a desk and a breast pump. I didn't resent them for having a child. I wasn't jealous. I felt nothing except I never imagined anyone's growth would cost me my own existence. I backed into the kitchen. Joanna followed me wordlessly. We sat at a small table by the window. "Does anyone know?" I asked. She nodded quietly. I guessed, but no one thought, "They'd do this without even asking you." I stared out at the backyard, where my wooden chairs still sat, dusty and unused. I whispered, "Maybe they think I'm used to this." Joanna squeezed my hand. "You are not meant to grow accustomed to being erased, Camille." I stood to get some fresh air, but as I looked up, I saw something on top of the fridge. It was a stack of documents, those folders my mom kept for important papers. No one was paying attention. Everyone was busy taking photos with the new owners. I stepped forward, climbed onto a small stool, grabbed the stack of papers, and silently tucked it into my bag. I passed through the living room. Noah laughed loudly. Jessica waved. My mother saw me and frowned. "Taking your little sulk outdoors again? Everyone's snapping pictures, you know." I calmly replied, "I just need fresh air. I'll be back soon." I didn't come back. I sat alone on the wooden bench in the backyard, opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was the original financial agreement with my signed name, clear as day. And there was something else, a lawyer's letter addressed to my mother and stepfather, warning that transferring the deed without my consent could constitute civil fraud or even criminal if my signature had been forged. I looked up. The house was still brightly lit. People were still laughing, clinking glasses, and me, the one who'd illuminated it all, sat in darkness, clutching the proof in my hands. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. "Stop sulking and come back in. If you'd just be a good sister and celebrate your brother." For the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt clarity. I sat in the backyard, the cool night breeze brushing against my neck like a quiet but firm reminder. In my lap was the folder of documents they thought I'd never find or wouldn't dare to read, but I had read it, every single word, and by the third page, there it was. A letter from the law firm Haskins and Lowe, sent to my mother and stepfather exactly 2 weeks ago. Simple. Director. No sugarcoating. Transferring ownership without the written consent of Camille Porter, who funded the entire down payment, may constitute asset fraud, violating Texas Civil Code Section 8B. I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I didn't cry. I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't tremble. I felt clear-headed. I unlocked my phone and scrolled down to a contact I'd almost erased from my life. Jonas Keller, attorney, via Joanna. Joanna had introduced him while working on my art restoration project. He specializes in cultural assets disputes. Meticulous, calm, discreet. I never thought I'd need him, but in that moment, his name was the only one that made sense. I texted him, "Jonas, this is Camille, Joanna's friend. I need legal help, urgently." 2 minutes later, he replied, "Joanna gave me the gist. See you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Bring all documents, the office is the same." I stared at the message, then looked up at the house. Laughter still echoing from the living room like a twisted play. Silently, I stood up, walked through the door as if nothing had happened. Inside, my mom, George, and Noah were lounging on the sofa, discussing paint colors for the living room. When I passed the threshold, they all looked up. "I see you felt the chill breeze," Mom said, her voice sweet with wine and victory. "Come in, pose for a photo. It's rare we're all together." I placed my bag on a chair and forced a smile, what Joanna had called my silent revenge face. "I'm not posing, but I want to say thank you," I said softly. George frowned. "Thank me for what?" "Thank you, for helping me see everything with utter clarity." Noah chuckled. "What are you even talking about?" I nodded at my bag. "Never mind. You'll understand soon." I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Noah say to Jessica in a low tone, "She'll get over it." Camille always sulks, then comes back. I didn't stop. I only said, "No, Noah, I won't get over it." But you'll wish I had. The next morning, I sat in Jonas's office holding a coffee I couldn't drink. He emerged, shook my hand, and invited me in. The room smelled of fresh books and old legal texts. I laid the documents on the desk. He flipped through them, nodding. 15 minutes passed in silence, his expression shifting from neutral to serious to grim. "Camille, they've committed a serious wrong," he finally said. I swallowed. "But the deed is in Noah's name now. An unlawful deed can be reversed, and if signatures were forged, something I suspect, this isn't just civil. We're facing criminal implications." My eyes closed for a moment as my heart pounded. He softened his tone. "They've been counting on you to do nothing, to accept it because you don't want to make a scene. But they've taken $190,000 from you. They hid crucial info and used the family angle to pressure your silence." I looked down at my hands, clasped together, and repeated his words internally. "Family doesn't give you the right to betray." Jonas asked bluntly, "What do you want?" I inhaled deeply. "I want the house back. I want them to understand they can't treat me like this again. Not ever." He nodded. "We'll file an emergency injunction to preserve the property. Then we'll work to void the transfer, and if necessary, submit evidence for criminal charges." I nodded too, feeling a strange calm settle over me, like a fresh canvas, ready for a new, purposeful painting. Jonas concluded, "Tomorrow they receive court papers. They'll know. Camille Porter is no longer the quiet, compliant daughter." That evening, I returned to my apartment to prepare for my restoration shift. My phone erupted with missed calls. Mom, 5 calls. Noah, 8 calls. George, "What are you doing?" I muted it, poured myself tea, opened an old draft, my unfinished restoration of a signatureless painting, and wrote in the margin, "No one erases my name again. The morning after Jonas filed the emergency motion, I returned to the museum like any other day. I stood in front of an unfinished painting, its base layer scuffed, the lower corner botched by a poor restoration, the brush strokes rubbing against the intended light. I quietly removed the fake paint, dusted it with a soft brush, then began mixing fresh pigments. The familiar rhythm soothed my hands, but it didn't blur the storm brewing outside. This morning, my family would receive the court order. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't regretful. I didn't want apologies. I only wanted, like any forged artwork, to be reclaimed, returned to the rightful creator. At exactly 9:47 a.m., my phone buzzed for the 8th time. Joanna texted, "They're downstairs. Eric, Noah is yelling. Mom's crying. George is pounding on the door." I texted back calmly, "Are you there?" "I'm in the car, watching." I exhaled. With Joanna, I wasn't alone. At 10:12, I received the courthouse call confirming the emergency injunction had been granted. The Willow Street house was officially sealed. No one could sell, repair, or transfer it in any way until a legal ruling was made. That afternoon, I returned to my apartment. The front door of my building was dented. The security guard shot me a weary look. "Is that your family?" They were making a scene most of the morning. I climbed to the 3rd floor. They were gone, but something waited at the door, a handwritten note under the doormat. My mom's handwriting unmistakable. "We are family. You're doing something that might tear us apart. Please reconsider." I didn't open it. I slipped it into another envelope, sealed it, and scribbled on the front, "Return to sender. Address, Camille Porter's purchased home." That evening, I checked my email and saw a new message from someone I didn't expect, Jessica C. Harper, Noah's fiancée. Subject, "Sorry if I'm intruding." I opened it. Just a few lines. "Camille." I didn't know how messed up this was. Noah told me the house was a gift from your parents. I believed it. I didn't know you paid for it. I didn't know the transfer was illegal. I saw the court order this morning. I'm in shock. I'm sorry if I ever came off as rude. If you need anything confirmed, I'll help. Jessica. I sat there for minutes, not moved, just validated. She wasn't the mastermind, but her honesty, even late, was the first nail in the facade Mom and George had built. I replied, "Thank you. You might keep copies of your texts with Noah. Better safe than sorry." The next morning, I walked into the main gallery area for our short meeting. I'm the lead restorer on Woman and the Rocking Chair, a painting that had its signature scraped off sometime in its history. Just as I was about to leave, senior curator Eleanor, silver-haired, kind, pulled me aside. "Camille," she said softly, "I heard whispers about your family's situation. I won't pry, but I've watched you restore paintings for 5 years, and you're the only one who always checks for the signature." I smiled, because missing a name means losing everything. That afternoon, Jonas called. Noah's lawyers reached out. "They want to negotiate privately. I haven't agreed. We've got the upper hand." I asked, "How did they react to the injunction?" He replied, "George slammed the table. Your mom cried. Noah called 3 times, asking if they could reverse it quickly." I said, "No need to reverse. Just return the title to the original name." Jonas paused for a beat. "They know you mean business, but I don't think they're afraid yet." I sipped my tea. "Good. Then let's show them what happens when a forgery faces expert evaluation." That night, after nearly 2 years of silence, I posted a status on social media. Some paintings look real, but when you strip away the layers, the original paint shines through, and sometimes a name that's been erased comes back brighter than ever. No tags, no context. 10 minutes later, Joanna texted, "That hit the mark." On the 3rd morning after the injunction, I got a text from Aunt June, my mom's sister out of state. "Camille, Grandma's talking to everyone and says you're suing the family over a misunderstanding. But I believe you. I still have those old email drafts from when you were preparing to buy the house." I replied, "Please keep them. They might come in handy, and thank you. Thank you for still seeing me as family." That night, I looked at the unfinished restored painting on my shelf. I sat down, opened my ink bottle, and carefully repainted the artist's signature, by hand with original pigment, with complete intention. No shaking, no hesitation. Because I learned something crucial. When the truth is buried, the person who's been hurt the most has to be the one to unearth it. And this time, I was holding the shovel. I knew they would come. There's a very specific kind of reaction people have when they realize they've been caught red-handed and there's no way out. They blame the one who caught them. Not themselves, not the choice they made, not the lie. That morning, I woke to fists hammering my third-floor apartment door like it owed them something. Joanna texted me right on cue. "You don't have to open it, but if you do, have everything ready on the table." I brewed tea, poured 2 cups, one for me and one left untouched. Not for them. For me to remember that this was the last time I'd host them as family. When I opened the door, my mother pushed straight in. She didn't wait for an invitation. George followed, huffing and red-faced, from anger or shame. I honestly couldn't tell. Noah stood outside by the hallway railing, holding his phone like a shield. Mom launched in immediately, voice quivering, eyes glossy. "Camille, what are you doing? If this gets out, our whole family's reputation, our name will be ruined." I asked calmly. "Our family's name? Or yours?" George jumped in, louder than he needed to be. "It's a misunderstanding. The deed had to be in Noah's name for insurance. It was temporary, just to secure the loan." I raised my hand, then walked to the table, and placed a thin folder down on the tray between us. Inside, the original co-investment agreement, signed by me, a formal warning letter from Haskins & Lowe sent to my mother, bank statements showing I wired the down payment, and a forensic handwriting report, commissioned by Jonas, concluding that the signature on the title transfer documents was forged. I didn't speak, just opened each page and let them read. Noah stepped inside, eyes narrowing. "You're taking your own parents to court over a house? I've got a baby on the way. What do you have? Paintings?" I met his eyes, steady. "No, Noah, I'm not taking them to court. They put themselves there the moment they forged my name. I just sent the envelope." George slammed his palm on the table. "You're destroying this family." I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened the voice memo app, and hit play. It was a recording Jonas had clipped for me, taken from a voicemail just days ago. "I know you're mad, but Noah has a family now. You don't need the house. His name on the deed doesn't hurt you, Camille. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." Silence. My mother collapsed into the armchair, face buried in her hands, crying like a child. She looked up, voice cracking. "You're not really going to have me investigated, are you? I didn't think it would go this far." I looked at her, long and hard, not with rage, not with bitterness, just with clarity. "Mom," I said slowly, "I've let so much slide. But if I stay quiet again, Camille Porter will forever be a footnote. And I'm tired. I'm not putting you in legal jeopardy. You did that when you signed my name." Noah stormed forward, face flushed, phone raised. "You think you're so smart? You're tearing us apart. This isn't over." I tilted my head. "Are you sure I'm the only one who's had their phone on speaker this whole time?" They stared, confused, until a voice burst out from Noah's phone speaker. "Jessica, clear as day. You forged your sister's signature. You forged her name to steal a house." Noah froze. My mother lunged to grab the phone, but it was too late. I stood up, gathered the folder. "She has every right to know, especially if you expect her to raise a child under the belief that it's okay to take what you didn't earn." I walked to the door. They stood there, frozen, like wax figures in the middle of a July heat wave. I said one thing: if the three of you still think this is just about a house, then I'm sorry. Because it's about more than that. It's about names. It's about worth. And I won't let mine be erased again. The next day, I filed an updated declaration to the court, this time with Jessica's statement included. Jonas reviewed the new materials, then nodded. You're setting precedent, not just for restitution, but for reclaiming what was legally and morally yours. That night, I sat by my window, brewed tea, and opened a canvas I'd left untouched since sophomore year, a self-portrait, no signature. I picked up my brush, dipped it into ink, and signed it in the bottom right corner, C. Porter. This time, the ink dried clean. No smudges, no edits, and no one was ever going to erase it again. 2 weeks after the court issued the injunction, my attorney Jonas's office received an official proposal from my family. Let's settle out of court. We'll return the property, plus agree to no criminal charges. I didn't respond immediately. Not because I wanted to drag things out, but because I wanted them to sit in the same silence I've known for 30 years. Let them taste it. Signing day was set in Jonas's third-floor conference room. I arrived early with only one thing in hand, the framed portrait I had signed, C. Porter, carefully placed on a standing easel right at eye level for my mother to see. They walked in, Mom, George, Noah, looking stripped of every shred of moral armor. No tears, no complaining, just the weary bitterness of people who've exhausted all escape routes. Jonas laid out the terms clearly. Return legal ownership of the house to Camille Porter. Pay $50,000 in legal fees, attorney costs, and emotional damages. Sign a notarized confession admitting procedural misconduct and violation of our original finance agreement. Camille Porter reserves the full right to publish, retain, or destroy that statement however she sees fit. Mom stiffened and whispered, Camille, is all this really necessary? I'm your mother. I didn't stiffen back. I simply tilted my head, meeting her gaze. Being a mother doesn't give the right to forge your child's signature. Being family certainly doesn't give the right to steal the work of someone who called you mom. Pen on paper, 1, 2, 3. Then it was my turn. I signed, my hand steady, no trembling. As they exited, Noah halted at the door, looking at me for the first time without that arrogant grin. You won, you know. Hope you're happy. I smiled softly. I didn't win. I just reclaimed the painting I created, one someone else thought they could take. And no, I'm not happy yet, but I'm getting there. 1 week later, I sat across from a developer in a boutique conversion real estate office. They'd wanted the Willow House for years, but the title tangle kept blocking them. No problem now. They offered 1.4 times the original price. I didn't negotiate. I said one thing. Transfer all proceeds directly to my personal savings. No co-signers, no agents, no exceptions. That news spread faster than I expected. That evening, my phone lit up with 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 texts from George, and a 57-second voice message from Noah. You can't just sell that house. We were going to live there. Do you know what people will say? That you kicked out your family for being selfish. I listened. Then I deleted it. Later, Joanna and I met at our usual cafe to celebrate. She ordered her standard espresso. I asked for chamomile tea, the one I always drink after a restoration shift. She lifted her cup in a toast. You just sold a house, and you just bought yourself back. I smiled. Yeah, and this time, my name's on the deed. My signature's on the line. And that portrait frame, that's my choice too. The next morning, I woke in my old apartment. Sunrise lit the wood floors, now slightly worn. I wrote a line on paper with a pen. Honor can't be split 3 ways. No forged signatures, and no one ever signs your name but you. I folded the paper and slipped it behind that portrait of C. Porter. No need for anyone else to read it, just me. Because every painting, even one whose name was scrubbed, finds its way back to its rightful creator. I moved into a small cottage on the western edge of the suburbs one quiet, late autumn morning, just as the maple trees were starting to blush and the sky broke into soft, watercolor patches of light. The house had a long wooden porch, 3 windows that caught the early sun, and a square little garden out back. I planted rows of lavender along the fence, tucked a few baby tomato sprouts in the left corner, and installed a trellis, just in case I wanted to try growing grapes next season. Everything was small, but tidy. No one pressing in. No midnight phone calls asking for temporary transfers. No family dinners where I sat at the far end of the table, listening to others talk about their failures like proof they deserved yet another chance. Here, no one needed me to be anything, but someone living her own life. A month after I moved in, I got the official court notice. The case was closed. Civil settlement only, no criminal charges filed after full compensation was paid and the signed admission was submitted. Jonas called, his voice lighter than I'd ever heard it. Congratulations. You didn't just get your house back, you reclaimed your name and the right to say no. I smiled. I choose to say no, but I don't choose to hate. That evening, I sat on the porch, lit a small orange blossom candle, and opened a fresh sketchbook. I drew my new front door, deep blue frame, round brass knob, and the lock. A brand new lock. My key. Mine alone. Just then, my phone buzzed. Landline number. My mother. I didn't pick up. A few seconds later, a voicemail. Camille, it's Mom. I heard you sold the house and bought a new place. They say it's cute. I was wondering if maybe you could help Noah a little. Jessica left him. Things are really bad. He's unemployed. You know he's not like you. He needs support. He's still your brother. I set the phone aside. Didn't power it off. Didn't delete it. Just left it there, like a sealed glass case in a museum, visible, but untouchable. A week later, she came. No warning. I had just finished watering the garden when I saw the silver Honda pull up to the curb. She stepped out, long coat, a face more sunken than I remembered, but the same old eyes, tired, and still trying to control. I stood up in the middle of the sunlit yard. I didn't walk over. She stopped at the fence, one hand resting on the wooden gate. You're not going to invite me in? I answered softly. That door. You don't have a key to anymore. She pressed her lips together. I'm not here to apologize. I know you're not ready to forgive. I just wanted to ask if maybe Noah could stay with you for a few months. He's got nowhere else. I looked at her for a long time, not letting anger spill, not letting pity take over. And then I said, you've chosen Noah so many times. This time, I choose me. She gave a thin smile. So you don't see yourself as part of the family anymore? I knelt and plucked a small weed from the flower bed, my hand steady. Family is where you don't need permission to stay. But I was kicked out of a home I paid for. And when you erased my name from everything, you stepped outside this door too. She stood a moment longer, then turned away. No tears, no shouting, just a quiet figure fading behind golden maples. That night, I took out the signed court statement, my mother's notarized admission of wrongdoing. I didn't burn it, didn't destroy it. I folded it, tucked it into a small leather pouch, locked it inside the safe, not to hold it over her, but to remind myself, if I ever grow weak, if the past begins to blur, there's proof, not just memory. The next morning, I planted a few violet seedlings near the porch. Small flowers, pale purple, low to the ground, but their scent lingers, stronger than you'd expect. Just like me, not loud, not flashy, but in the right soil, I endure, and I go deep. I nailed a small wooden sign to the front gate. Garden tended by Camille, entry by invitation only. And that entire winter, no one knocked. No one was invited. No one had a key. Just me and freedom. Spring came late that year, but in my garden, it arrived early. The violet rose bloomed in vivid purple, like dried ink on coarse paper, next to the resilient lavender I planted in the very first days I moved in. I reopened my personal restoration notebook, the one where I used to record every brushstroke, every blend of adhesive, every damaged frame I tried to mend. But this time, I added a new section: people who need restoring. Not paintings, people. I started a small volunteer initiative, partnering with the local community center for women who'd been stripped of legal rights within their own families, divorced women who lost their homes, women whose signatures were forged to transfer property, caretakers left out of wills after a lifetime of devotion. I called it Signed Back. No one really knew where the name came from, but I did. In the second week, I met Rosa, a brown-skinned woman in her early 50s whose ex-husband had secretly sold their shared house because it was in his name alone. She didn't cry much. She just said, "I don't need the house. I just need someone to say I'm not crazy for feeling robbed." I handed her a copy of the legal template I once used, showed her how to approach a local attorney. When she hesitated and asked, "Do you think I still have a chance?" I answered, "You don't need a chance. You need a signature, and this time it needs to be yours." At the museum, I was offered a spot on the restoration board, something that had never been extended to me before. They wanted me to lead a new project, restoring art pieces that had lost their original names during war or migration. When I asked, "Why me?" the curator Eleanor simply said, "Because no one understands better than you that losing a name doesn't mean losing worth." Joanna was still my steady companion. We kept up our tradition of silent Saturdays. No complaints, no old names, just small acts that made us feel like we belonged somewhere again. That weekend, we painted the garden fence. I mixed the shades slightly off, a muted reddish brown. Joanna looked at it and said, "Looks like ink." "Suits you." I just smiled, didn't explain. My mother still called, occasionally. Once she left a message: "If you're not angry anymore, come home for dinner. The house feels cold these days." I replied, "I'm not angry. I just won't return to a place that once erased my name, because now I finally have a place to write it." At the end of the month, I received a parcel, a replica of the old family portrait that used to hang in the house, returned from court as part of the settlement. The frame was worn. The paint faded. I removed the backing, gently wiped away the dust. At the bottom right corner, where I once signed my name and where my mother once said, "You don't need to be on it," I pulled out a pen. Dark reddish brown ink. One stroke, C. Porter. That night I sat on the porch, opened a fresh notebook, not to sketch, but to write. The first page read, "I was once erased from the documents, once called the one who only draws, once treated like my dignity could be signed away. Not anymore. Now I sign my name onto every part of my life, and no one else holds the pen but me." I used to believe that if I was good enough, I'd be chosen. But sometimes, kindness makes people think you're replaceable. Now I understand. Just because I signed first doesn't mean I have to step aside. I signed, not to ask for recognition. I signed to remind myself that I have the right to write my own life in my own way. And this time, my hand didn't shake. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever signed something just to keep the peace, or stayed quiet when you should have been seen, then maybe, like me, you're ready to take the pen back. Subscribe to Renvenge Zinnia, where silent stories find their voice again. And maybe yours will be next.